All right, welcome back to Lesson 2. We're looking at the Covenant of Moses. Last lesson, we looked at the 3 scripture verses I wanted you to know. Last place we left off, they had made it to Sinai. They ratified the covenant with the blood of the bulls, half in the altar, half in the people, symbolizing the family relationship with God, but also symbolizing their death if they failed to keep the covenant, which they did when they built the golden calf idol. I want to do a quick chart to show you how things are changing between God and Israel throughout the course of the book of Exodus. Original plan, original idea, which we find when they get to Sinai, is God is going to come down Mount Sinai and be with his people Israel. If you've been doing your reading, you read how God came down the mountain in fire after a day of three days of purification of the people. But when they saw God coming down the mountain, they viewed him as a threat, as something scary. And they told Moses, "We don't want to see God. You," Moses, "talk to God. Tell us what he says, and we'll talk to you, and you can talk to God on our behalf." Now Israel has put an intermediary between them and God. So now Moses is the one who talks to God, and God speaks to Moses to give information to Israel. Presumably that would be why Moses was on the mountain for 40 days while they were building the golden calf. So their sinful hearts led to even worse things. But it gets worse after the golden calf. After the golden calf, we'll have yet another group put in between. Now, God, Moses, now we have the Levites mediating the law from Moses to Israel. Because after the golden calf, the firstborn sons lost the privilege to the priesthood, and the Levites gained that privilege. So if you see in the picture behind, you have the tabernacle where the fire of God's presence is dwelling. That is a place where Moses can go. Inside that cordoned off area, that's a place where the Levites can go. And then all the tents around that area, those are the 12 tribes. Understanding the importance of the golden calf event is crucial to understanding the nature of Israel's identity and God's desire for them moving forward. Before the golden calf idolatry, animal sacrifices were voluntary. After that, we're going to have a tabernacle and a temple system where animals are going to be sacrificed every single day. Now, why would God want to institute daily mandatory animal sacrifices? Before it was voluntary, meaning they could do it just whenever they wanted to, right? If you want to go worship God and you want to give him something, you can sacrifice an animal to worship God, and that'd be fine. After the golden calf, every day animals must be sacrificed. Why? What did they just finish worshiping in the golden calf? An animal god of Egypt. So now, God, wanting to break their addiction to worshiping the false gods of Egypt, orders them to sacrifice animals every day. It's very difficult to worship something that you're killing every day. Before the golden calf, firstborn sons of all 12 tribes were priests. After the golden calf, only the Levites are priests. When Moses came down the mountain, he saw the golden calf. He said, "Who is going to be on the Lord's side?" Firstborn sons were silent. Only the Levites came to Moses' side. Before the golden calf, God called Israel to be a kingdom of priests. They're called to go, to rule over, and teach the Canaanites how to worship God. After the golden calf, Israel is called to drive the Canaanites out of the land. Why? If Israel goes into the land with the Canaanites, they're going to end up worshiping the false gods of the Canaanites, just like they worship the false gods of the Egyptians. Before the golden calf, there was faith that they would be a sanctifying force. They would go in and teach about God. After the golden calf, they're no longer trustworthy. Now they're called to drive the Canaanites out of the land, because Moses also fears that they'll worship the Canaanite gods. The original plan was to make a very brief stop at Sinai, just to ratify the covenant. After the golden calf, they end up spending another year in the Sinai wilderness because they had to organize all the laws and they had to take a census. So they counted all the firstborn sons of all the tribes, and they counted all the Levites all the Levites, so that they could make this replacement. Now that we have a new priesthood, Moses must train this new priesthood, so they spend an additional year in Sinai while the Levites learn these new laws. These new laws can be read in the book of Leviticus, which is why it's called Leviticus, because it was mainly a book for the Levites. While it is a book of rules for the Levites, the last part of it is also what's called the Holiness Code, which is for the Levites to teach all the 12 tribes. Right? These are laws that the other 12 tribes must now honor. Paul in the New Testament tells us that additional laws were given. Because of sin, more new laws had to be added on to put an end to the sin. What we see here is the first generation of Israelites failed in worshiping the golden calf. So God had to change his plan a little. Now his plan is he desires that the second generation, the next generation, will be raised up, trained by the Levites, and where their parents failed in worshiping the golden calf, this generation will succeed in being faithful to God. How do you think that's going to end up? Well, we'll see very soon. Now, when the Israelites leave Sinai and they go to Canaan for the first time, they sent in some spies to see what kind of opposition they're up against, right? How strong are these people? So they send in 12 spies. They say, wow, this land is wonderful. It's a land, as they say, a land of milk and honey. And they cut a giant cluster of grapes and bring it back to the camp to show how plentiful and fruitful this land of Canaan is. Now, of the 12 spies, only 2 of them said they should go into the land. 10 of them said there's no way we will ever be able to defeat these Canaanites. They said the Canaanites are giants. They're huge. And worse than that, they even devour their own inhabitants. Now, what could they possibly mean by that? Some people think that they're speaking of the god Molech. Moloch was a god that they honored through ritual human sacrifice, but not just any human sacrifice. This was infant sacrifice. So they would sacrifice these very small infants by throwing them into basically a furnace. And they would play music around this furnace so that they would drown out the screaming of the children. It was a horrible thing. And obviously, it scared the 10 of the 12 spies so bad that they said, it'd be better for us to die in the wilderness than fight the Canaanites. So Joshua and Caleb, they say, yes, all this is true. It's a very scary thing. But with God on our side, we can do it. I mean, just look what happened to the Egyptians, right? We were able to defeat them in the Exodus. Who do you think Israel listened to? Well, they ended up listening to the 10 spies. It says they wept all night and they prayed to God that it would be better to die in the desert than to die at the hand of the Canaanites. So God answers their prayer. If you'd rather die in the wilderness than fight in Canaan, so be it. He answers their prayer and makes them to wander for 40 years until the first generation dies off. The second generation, hopefully, trained by the Levites, will succeed where their parents fail. Do they succeed? Well, we're going to find that out in next time's set of notes. Until then, have a good one.